I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The locker room smelled like it always did, a mixture of sweat, deodorant, and that strange antiseptic scent that never quite masks everything else. Our team had been practicing for hours, and everyone was getting ready for the big game tomorrow. I'd been on the basketball team for 3 years now, and while most of my teammates knew I was gay, it wasn't something we talked about much. Sports have this way of simultaneously breaking down and reinforcing barriers. We were all just players on the court, but locker room talk still had its unspoken rules. Jake had joined our team just this season. He was tall, with the kind of easy confidence that made him instantly popular. We developed a decent friendship, nothing particularly close, but comfortable enough. He was definitely straight, had a girlfriend he'd mention regularly, and participated in all the typical heterosexual banter that filled our locker room. I'd never thought much about our interactions until that day. Being part of a sports team when you're not straight comes with its own set of challenges. You're constantly navigating this invisible line, wanting to be authentic without making others uncomfortable, wanting to be one of the guys without hiding who you are. Most of my teammates were cool about it, but there was always that underlying awareness, that slight carefulness in how they interacted with me. Not in a malicious way, just in that awkward, I don't want you to think I'm thinking about it, even though now I'm obviously thinking about it kind of way. Let me set the scene for you. It was Thursday afternoon, about 24 hours before our championship game against our crosstown rivals. The energy in practice had been electric. Everyone was dialed in, moving with purpose, communicating better than we had all season. Coach had even ended practice early, telling us to rest up and visualize success for tomorrow. That's when the locker room filled with the usual pre-game rituals. Every player has their superstitions or preparations. Marcus always retied his shoes 3 times before putting them in his locker. Dion would meticulously organize his gear in the exact same order. And Jake always taped his wrists and 2 of his fingers in a specific pattern that he claimed helped with his shooting grip. I'd noticed it before, this careful ritual he had, the precision with which he applied the athletic tape. I was sitting on the bench in front of my locker, scrolling through some messages on my phone, when I heard Jake cursing under his breath. I looked up to see him searching through his gym bag with increasing frustration. "Everything okay?" I asked, more out of courtesy than deep concern. He looked up, ran a hand through his still damp hair, and sighed. "I'm out of tape. I could have sworn I had another roll." The worry in his voice was disproportionate to the problem, but I understood. When you have a ritual, disrupting it feels like tempting fate. "I've got some," I offered, reaching into my own bag where I always kept extra supplies. "Athletic tape, right? Not the kinesiological stuff." "Yeah, the regular white tape." He seemed relieved. "You're a lifesaver, man. I can't play without it tomorrow." I pulled out the roll and held it up. Jake moved over to my section of the bench, sitting down closer than he normally would. I could smell his shower gel, something woodsy and expensive. He reached for the tape, and that's when it happened. Instead of just taking the roll from my outstretched hand, his fingers brushed against mine, lingered for what felt like a second too long. There was this moment, this brief, electric moment, where his eyes met mine, and something passed between us that I couldn't immediately identify. His hand was warm, slightly calloused from years of handling basketballs, and the contact sent an unexpected jolt through me. Now, I need to be clear about something. In that moment, I wasn't reading into anything. I wasn't constructing some fantasy or projecting my sexuality onto a straight teammate. But I also wasn't imagining the intentionality of that touch. It wasn't the accidental brush of hands when passing the salt at dinner. It felt deliberate, a communication of something unspoken. The locker room around us continued its normal chaos. Guys laughing, music playing from someone's portable speaker, the sound of locker doors slamming. But in our little bubble, there was this sudden, strange tension. Jake's expression changed almost imperceptibly. A slight widening of the eyes, a barely noticeable flush creeping up his neck. "Thanks," he said, his voice just a touch lower than normal. He took the tape and moved back to his locker, but I noticed him glancing my way a couple of times as he went through his taping ritual. I sat there, trying to process what had just happened. Was I overthinking this? Probably. Did I want to be overthinking this? I wasn't sure. Jake was attractive, sure, but he was a teammate, and he was straight. Those were 2 very good reasons to shut down whatever flutter of interest I just felt. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of conflicting thoughts. I found myself replaying that moment over and over, analyzing every microsecond of the interaction. The way his fingers had deliberately slid against mine. The eye contact that held just a beat too long. The slight change in his demeanor afterward. That evening, I called my friend Alex, who had graduated last year and was the only other gay guy I knew who'd played college sports. I needed perspective from someone who might understand the complexity of the situation. So let me get this straight. No pun intended. Alex said after I'd explained everything. Your hot straight teammate touched your hand while asking for tape, and now you're spiraling. When he put it that way, it did sound ridiculous. I'm not spiraling, I defended. I don't know. It felt different. Different how? Alex pressed. Like, intentional. Like he was trying to communicate something without saying it. Even as I said it, I could hear how it might sound to someone else. Alex was quiet for a moment. Look, I'm not saying it's impossible. People are complicated. Sexuality is complicated. But be careful with this, okay? Reading signals wrong in a team environment can make things really uncomfortable really fast. He was right, of course. The last thing I needed was to create awkwardness right before our championship game. I decided to let it go, to chalk it up to my imagination and focus on the game ahead. But the next day in our pre-game warm-ups, something had definitely shifted. Jake was more aware of me somehow. I could feel his attention even when we weren't directly interacting. He chose the spot next to me during stretches. During our shooting drills, he made a point to give me high fives after good shots, his hand lingering just a fraction longer than necessary. Nothing obvious enough that anyone else would notice, but unmistakable to me. Let me explain why this matters so much in the context of sports teams. There's this intense physical and emotional intimacy that develops among teammates that doesn't exist in many other spaces. You see each other vulnerable, exhausted, elated. You touch constantly. High fives, shoulder claps, huddles where you're pressed against each other. But there's also this carefully maintained boundary, especially between straight and gay players. Everyone's hyper-aware of not crossing lines, not making assumptions, not creating discomfort. So when that boundary seems to blur, even slightly, it creates this vertigo, this sense of the ground shifting under your feet. Was Jake questioning things about himself? Was he just being friendly and I was misinterpreting? Was he testing boundaries for some reason? I had no way of knowing, and asking directly felt impossible. The championship game itself was intense. Neck and neck until the final quarter when we pulled ahead by 8 points. Jake and I had this unexpected chemistry on the court, anticipating each other's movements, finding each other with passes that seemed almost telepathic. When the final buzzer sounded and we'd won, the team erupted in celebration. In the chaos of jumping, hugging, and shouting, Jake grabbed me in an embrace that was both completely normal in context and somehow charged with something else. We did it, he said directly into my ear, his arms tight around me, his body pressed against mine in a way that sent my heart racing for reasons unrelated to our victory. The celebration continued into the locker room and later at a team party at our captain's apartment. Jake stayed close to me throughout the night, our conversations feeling more personal, more meaningful than they had before. He asked questions about when I'd known I was gay, how I'd come out, what it was like dating guys. These weren't the awkwardly curious questions straight guys sometimes ask. There was something more searching in his approach. As the party wound down, we ended up on the balcony alone, looking out at the campus lights. The spring air was cool, but not cold, and the slight distance from the music inside created a bubble of privacy. Can I ask you something? Jake said, his voice hesitant in a way I hadn't heard before. Sure, I replied, trying to keep my tone casual while my pulse quickened. How did you know? Like really know? He wasn't looking at me, instead focusing intently on the bottle in his hands. I took a breath, understanding the weight of the question. It wasn't one moment. It was a series of realizations, I guess. Recognizing patterns in who I was drawn to, who I thought about, who made me feel something. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. Some people know from when they're really young. For others, it's more fluid, more of a journey. Jake nodded slowly, still not meeting my eyes. I've always been with girls. Only girls. But lately, I've been feeling confused about some things. The admission hung in the air between us. I didn't push, didn't pry. Sometimes the most important thing you can offer someone is space to explore their thoughts without pressure or expectation. That's okay, I said finally. Confusion is part of being human. You don't have to have all the answers right now. He turned to me then, his expression vulnerable in a way I'd never seen during all our practices and games. Yesterday, when I touched your hand, I wanted to see how it would feel, if I would feel something. The honesty of it struck me. And did you? I asked quietly. Yeah, he admitted. I did. And it scared me. We talked for another hour on that balcony, about identity and expectations, about the pressure to fit into neat categories. I shared my own journey, the confusion and fear I'd felt, the relief of eventually accepting myself. Jake mostly listened, occasionally asking questions or relating parts of my experience to his own emerging feelings. I want to be clear about something. This wasn't a romantic encounter. It wasn't the beginning of some secret relationship or a dramatic coming-out moment for Jake. It was something more nuanced, more human. It was one person trusting another enough to explore a vulnerable question about themselves. In the weeks that followed, Jake and I developed a closer friendship. He started dating a girl from his economics class, but he also continued our conversations about sexuality and identity. He came to understand himself as someone with capacity for attraction that didn't always fit neatly into the labels he'd grown up with. Not quite bisexual, not exclusively straight. Just Jake, figuring things out as he went. For me, the experience reinforced something I'd been learning over and over. Human connection and attraction exist on spectrums that defy our attempts to categorize them neatly. That brief touch over a roll of athletic tape hadn't been some secret signal of hidden desire. It had been a moment of curiosity, of testing boundaries, of a person trying to understand himself better. This story matters because so many of us exist in these in-between spaces, questioning and exploring aspects of ourselves that don't align with the narratives we've been given. And sometimes, it's the smallest moments, a lingering touch, an honest conversation, that creates space for that exploration. I've thought often about how differently things might have gone if I'd reacted with assumption rather than openness, if I'd either dismissed the moment entirely or invested it with romantic meaning it didn't have. Instead, by staying present with the complexity of the interaction, both Jake and I found room to grow. The next season, when a freshman joined the team and nervously came out to us during a team bonding event, it was Jake who spoke up first, assuring him that he was accepted exactly as he was. I caught Jake's eye across the room in that moment, and we shared a smile of understanding, a recognition of how far we'd both come in our understanding of ourselves and others. So if there's one thing I've learned from that moment when my straight teammate asked for tape and touched my hand, it's this. Human connection defies simple categorization. The most meaningful interactions often happen in those unscripted moments where curiosity overcomes fear, where we allow ourselves to ask questions without knowing the answers, where we touch, literally and figuratively, the boundaries of our understanding. And sometimes, a roll of athletic tape can be the unexpected catalyst for the kind of authentic human connection that changes us in ways we never anticipated. Total_char_count, 13,095.